You find a burlap sack on a lonely desert trail. It's a strange thing to see out here, where the world is just rock and sky and the kind of silence that rings in your ears. You think maybe it's just trash, dumped by some traveler who didn't care. But then, the sack moves. Just a twitch, a shudder. Enough to stop your heart for a beat. What would you do? Would you walk away? Tell yourself it's just the wind playing tricks on you? Or would you move closer, your hand drifting toward the knife on your belt? Every nerve in your body screaming that some things are better left alone? My name is Sam Redhawk, and I didn't walk away. I should have. God knows I should have turned my back and headed for my cabin and never looked back. But I couldn't. Something pulled me forward, some ghost of a memory, and what I found inside that sack, it didn't just change my life. It dug up a grave I'd spent 6 years filling. The wind out here, it whispers. The old ones say it carries voices. Prayers, warnings, the laughter of children long gone. That afternoon, the wind was quiet. Too quiet. Like the whole world was holding its breath, waiting. I was heading down the ridge, firewood on my back when I saw it. A lump of brown against the red dirt. Not a dead coyote. Not a discarded blanket. It was wrong. The shape was all wrong. I dropped the wood and crept closer, moving the way my father taught me, silent as a shadow. My rifle was on my back, but my hand was steady. The closer I got, the more the silence screamed. Then I saw the rope, cinched tight at the top. And I heard the sound, a soft, wet gasp, the sound of someone trying to breathe through a lungful of blood. It wasn't an animal. My fingers fumbled with the knot. It was tied with cruelty meant to hold. I pulled my knife, sliced the rope, and peeled back the rough fabric. The smell hit me first, sweat and fear and old blood. And then I saw her, a woman crumpled like a discarded doll. Her face was a mess of purple and black bruises, one eye swollen completely shut. Her dress was ripped, her skin cold. But she was alive. Barely. My own breath hitched in my chest, because I knew that face. I'd seen it in my dreams every night for 6 long years. I'd kiss those lips, trace those high cheekbones with my thumb, watch those eyes crinkle when she laughed. It was Claire. My Claire. The woman I'd buried with my own 2 hands under the cottonwood tree down by the creek. My mind shattered. For a second, I thought the sun had finally cooked my brain. Ghosts don't bleed. Ghosts don't get stuffed in sacks and left for the coyotes. I reached out a trembling hand, my fingers brushing her bruised cheek. Her skin was real. It was warm. This wasn't a ghost, but it couldn't be Claire. I watched them lower her into the ground. I filled the hole myself, shovelful by shovelful, until my hands were raw and my soul was empty. So who was this? Who was this woman wearing my dead lover's face? I forced myself to look closer, past the blood and the swelling, and I saw the differences. A small scar above her eyebrow that Claire never had, a sharpness to her jawline, a hardness that Claire, my gentle Claire, never possessed. It was like looking at a reflection in a warped piece of glass. Almost right, but terrifyingly wrong. And then, a memory hit me. A lazy summer afternoon, years ago. Claire laughing, her head in my lap. She'd told me a secret, something she rarely spoke of. I have a twin, Sam, she'd said. Her name is Emma. She stayed back east when I came out here. She's the tough one, the fighter. Emma Harrow. And here she was, dumped like garbage in the middle of my world, a ghost with a pulse. I didn't think. I just acted. I scooped her up into my arms. She weighed nothing, a bundle of broken bones and feverish skin. Whoever did this to her, they didn't just want her hurt. They wanted her gone. They wanted her erased. As I carried her back toward my cabin, one thought burned in my mind. The people who buried Claire once had just tried to bury her again. And I'd be damned if I let them finish the job. My cabin is hidden, tucked away in a ravine where most folks wouldn't dare to look. It's quiet. It's safe. It's been my tomb for 6 years. I pushed the door open with my shoulder and laid Emma down on my narrow cot. The room smelled of sage and pine smoke, the smell of my solitude. I got the fire going, the flames chasing the shadows into the corners. Then I brought a basin of water and a clean cloth and began the slow work of cleaning her wounds. Her wrists were raw with rope burns. Her ribs were a dark map of pain. There was a mark on her collarbone, the ugly shape of a boot heel, ground into her skin. This wasn't a fight. This was an execution that got interrupted. I worked gently, trying not to cause her more pain, but she flinched and moaned in her fever dream. I rolled up the torn sleeve of her dress to clean a cut on her arm, and that's when I saw it. That's when everything changed. It was a brand, faded but clear. A crude circle with a single line splitting it down the middle. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just some random mark. I'd seen it before. Not here in the quiet of the desert, but years ago, in the mud and blood of the war. It was the mark of a specific unit, a group of scouts who went by the name the Reapers. They were known for being butchers, for taking no prisoners, for leaving their mark on the people they broke. But what was their mark doing on this woman's arm? The man who led them, a monster named Rusk, I'd heard he'd settled somewhere out here after the war. Got rich, got respectable. I'd even heard his name whispered in connection to Drywood, the same town where Claire had died. Suddenly, this wasn't just a random act of violence. This wasn't just a ghost from my past. This was a message, a warning, and it meant that the war I thought I'd left behind had followed me home. Emma Harrow wasn't just the sister of the woman I loved. She was a survivor of something far darker, and her presence here, on my cot, meant that the men who killed Claire were still out there. They were still hunting, and now they had brought the hunt to my front door. I sat by the fire, the lantern light flickering on my face, and I sharpened my knife. The slow, rhythmic scrape of steel on stone was the only sound in the room. It was the sound of a promise, the sound of a grave being open. Around midnight, she woke up. Her breath hitched and her eyes fluttered open. They were pale blue, just like Claire's, but filled with a terror that I'd never seen in her sister. "Where?" she whispered, her voice a dry rasp. "You're safe," I said, keeping my voice low. She tried to sit up, but hissed in pain and fell back. She stared at my face, her eyes trying to focus, and then recognition dawned. But it wasn't relief I saw. It was fear, a deeper, colder fear. "You!" she breathed. "You're Sam Redhawk." I didn't answer. How did she know my name? "Claire, she wrote to me about you," Emma said, her words slow and measured. She was watching me, like a cornered animal watching a wolf. Her last letter, the one I got the week before she died. My throat went tight. "What did she say?" Emma's gaze was hard, accusing. "She said you were dangerous. She said she was afraid of you. She said if anything ever happened to her, I should tell the sheriff it was you." The world tilted. The air left my lungs. For 6 years, I'd grieved a woman I thought loved me. For 6 years, I'd lived like a ghost, haunted by her memory. And now her own sister, her own blood, was telling me that Claire's last words were a warning against me. Everything I thought I knew was a lie. The woman I loved had painted me as a monster, and this broken woman on my cot, this ghost of her, believed it. She believed I was the one who had destroyed her sister, and maybe, just maybe, she was right to be afraid. The silence in the cabin was a living thing. It pressed in on us, heavy with the weight of her words. Claire had warned her, against me. The thought was a knife twisting in my gut. For 6 years I'd mourned her as a victim, a gentle soul taken by a cruel world. But what if she wasn't? What if the woman I loved had been playing a different game entirely? "Why?" I finally asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Why would she write that?" Emma's one good eye stared at me, searching for something. "I don't know. The letter was frantic. It didn't make sense. She talked about secrets in Drywood, about a man named Rusk, who ran the boarding house where she volunteered. She said he was a monster hiding in plain sight. And then she said you were tangled up in it, that you were just as dangerous as he was." Rusk. The name again. The leader of the Reapers. The man whose brand was burned into her arm. The pieces were starting to click into place, but the picture they were making was uglier than anything I could have imagined. They told everyone you killed her, Emma whispered. The sheriff, my father, everyone. They said you were a jealous savage, that you couldn't stand that she was from a good family. When they found her in the river, they said you did it. I didn't, I said, my voice flat. But even as I said it, a cold doubt crept in. Had I missed something? Was I so blinded by grief that I couldn't see the truth? I found her, I told Emma, the words tasting like ash. I was the one who pulled her from the water. I carried her back to town. And the sheriff, a man named Coates, he looked me in the eye and said, "You should have just left her, Red Hawk. Would have saved us all a lot of trouble." Would by morning the whole town wanted my head on a pike. Emma flinched. So you ran. I didn't run, I said, my voice hard. I left. There's a difference. I knew what a town mob looked like. They wouldn't have just hanged me. They'd have made a show of it. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. We sat there, two strangers bound by a ghost, a woman who was either a saint or a liar, maybe both. In her letters before that last one, Emma said quietly, she called you her anchor, her safe place. She said you taught her how to read the silence of the desert. It doesn't make sense that she would suddenly be afraid of you. Unless someone made her afraid, I said, the thought solidifying in my mind. Rusk. If she found out what he was doing, he wouldn't just threaten her. He'd try to isolate her, turn her against the one person who might be able to protect her. I looked at the brand on Emma's arm. That mark, Rusk's mark. He used it to brand the girls he trafficked, the ones who saw too much, or the ones who fought back. It was his way of saying, you belong to me now. No one will ever believe you. My gut clenched. Did he do that to Claire? Emma shook her head, a tear finally escaping her swollen eye. I don't know. I never saw her again after she came west. But my last visit to Drywood, I was working for Rusk. He took me in after my parents died. He said he wanted to honor Claire's memory. The words were bitter. I was a servant in his house. I saw the girls, young, scared. They'd arrive in the middle of the night and be gone by morning. I started asking questions. I found his ledger. The ledger, I repeated. This was it, the proof. Names, dates, payments, she whispered. Some names had a red cross next to them. The night I found it, he called me to his study. He'd been drinking. He told me I was too curious for my own good, just like my sister. That was the last thing she remembered before waking up in the sack. A cold, hard fury settled in my bones. It wasn't the hot rage of a mob. It was the patient, waiting anger of the desert itself. Rusk hadn't just killed Claire. He had systematically destroyed her. He'd isolated her, terrified her, and then, when she wouldn't break, he'd thrown her in the river and framed me for it. And now he'd tried to do the same to her sister. We have to get that ledger, I said. It wasn't a question. Emma looked at me, the fear in her eyes slowly being replaced by something else, something harder. Flint. Go back there? To Drywood? Sam, they'll kill you on sight. Let them try, I said. Rusk thinks he's buried his secrets. It's time we started digging them up. I stood and offered her a tin cup of water. Her hand was shaking, but she took it. As she drank, her eyes met mine over the rim of the cup. The question was there, unspoken. Can I trust you? Claire might have been afraid at the end, I said softly, but the Claire I knew was a fighter. She just did her fighting quietly. I think she left you that ledger for a reason. I think she was counting on you to be the tough one. Emma lowered the cup. A flicker of her sister's smile touched her lips, a sad, broken thing. She always said I got the backbone in the family. She looked down at her bruised hands. All right, Red Hawk, let's go get your name back. But as she said it, I noticed something. A small, folded piece of paper clutched in her hand. It must have been there the whole time, hidden in her palm. What's that? I asked. She looked down, her expression changing. It wasn't hope or determination now. It was confusion, and a new kind of fear. She slowly unfolded the paper. It was a torn page, a piece of a letter, the handwriting elegant and familiar. It was Claire's. There were only a few words visible. Not who he says he is. The brand is a lie. The real danger is the sheriff. Trust the boy. Sheriff Coates. The man who'd told me to leave Claire's body in the river. The man who'd led the charge to have me hanged. And the boy? Who was the boy? The brand is a lie. What did that mean? I thought I'd finally found the truth. But this torn note from a dead woman's hand just shattered it all over again. We weren't just going up against a monster named Rusk. We were walking into a town where the law itself was part of the sickness, and our only clue was a cryptic warning to trust a boy we'd never met. The torn scrap of paper lay on the rough wooden table between us, a ghost's final message. Trust the boy. It was maddening. Drywood was full of boys, stable boys, shop boys, ranch hands. Which one? And what did Claire mean? The brand is a lie. It was Rusk's mark, I was sure of it. I'd seen it on the bodies of men he'd broken during the war. This changes things, Emma said, her voice strained. If Sheriff Coates is involved, we can't just walk in there. We were never going to just walk in, I replied, my mind racing. But now we know we're walking into a trap with no idea where the jaws are. I picked up the note. The paper was old, brittle. Claire must have given it to Emma somehow, or Emma had found it. But when? Her memory of the attack was a blur. For 2 days we waited. We waited for the swelling on Emma's face to go down, for the strength to return to her limbs. I hunted, she rested. We spoke little, but a strange kind of understanding grew between us. I'd look at her and see Claire's eyes staring back, but the soul behind them was different. It was wounded, yes, but it was also sharp, like a shard of obsidian. While Claire was like the gentle desert rain, Emma was the lightning that came with the storm. On the third morning, she was on her feet, pacing the small cabin. I'm ready, she said. You're still weak. I'll get stronger on the ride, she countered, her jaw set. We're losing time, Sam. Every day we wait, he could move that ledger, or another girl could disappear. She was right. I packed jerky and filled 2 canteens. Before we left, I offered her a revolver. She looked at it, then shook her head. She picked up my spare skinning knife instead. I like to be closer to my work, she said, a grim shadow passing over her face. It was a side of her that was both frightening and necessary. The desert didn't reward softness. We rode at night, sticking to the canyons and washes, avoiding the main trails. The moon was a sliver in the sky, offering just enough light to see the path ahead. The silence of the desert was our shield. As we got closer to Drywood, the air itself seemed to change. It felt heavier, charged with bad memories. The boy, Emma said suddenly, her voice pulling me from my thoughts. In the letter. I think I know who she meant. I turned in my saddle. Who? There was a stable boy at the boarding house. Name's Billy. He's young, maybe 17. Freckles, red hair. Rusk used to beat him something fierce. Claire. She was kind to him. She'd sneak him food, tend to his cuts. He worshipped the ground she walked on. If she trusted anyone in that house, it would have been him. It was a long shot, but it was all we had. All right, we find Billy. We reached the outskirts of Drywood just before dawn, leaving our horses hidden in a rocky alcove. The town was asleep, dreaming its rotten dreams. The Harrow House, as Rusk had mockingly renamed it, stood dark and silent at the end of the main street. He'd used her name, her memory, as a cover for his filth. Looking at it made my blood boil. The stables are around back, Emma whispered. Billy sleeps in the loft. We moved like ghosts through the alleys, the dust muffling our footsteps. We found the stable easily. The smell of hay and manure was thick in the air. I held up a hand listening. Nothing but the soft snuffling of horses. I pointed to the ladder leading up to the hayloft. Emma nodded. I went up first, knife in hand. The loft was dark, but a sliver of pre-dawn light cut through a crack in the wall. I saw a figure huddled under a threadbare blanket. It was a boy, just as Emma had described. I nudged him gently with my boot. He shot up, his eyes wide with terror. Before he could scream, I clamped a hand over his mouth. Billy, I said, my voice low and urgent. Don't make a sound. We're not here to hurt you. We're friends of Claire. His eyes darted from me to Emma, who had just climbed the ladder. He saw her face in the dim light, and a look of pure shock crossed his features. He thought he was seeing a ghost. Miss Harrow? He stammered when I removed my hand. My name is Emma, she said softly. I'm Claire's sister. The relief on his face was palpable. They said you were dead. Rusk told everyone you ran off and got killed by bandits. Rusk lies, Emma said. Billy, we need your help. Claire left me a note. She said to trust you. The boy's expression changed. He seemed to age 10 years in a second. He nodded slowly. She told me something bad was going to happen. She gave me something. For you. She said if she disappeared, I was to give it to her sister, if she ever came looking. He reached into the straw and pulled out a small, oilskin-wrapped package. He handed it to Emma. Her hands trembled as she unwrapped it. Inside was a small brass key and another note in Claire's hand. Emma, this is the key to the floor safe in Rusk's office. The real ledger is in there. The one on his desk is a fake, a decoy, but you can't get to it. His office is a trap. He has a wire connected to the sheriff's office. The moment that door opens, Coates will know. The boy knows another way. Don't let Sam go in. Rusk is expecting him. It's a trap meant for him. A trap. A trap meant for me. All this time, Rusk hadn't just been covering his tracks. He'd been waiting for me to come back, seeking vengeance. He wanted me to break into his office, find the fake ledger, and trip the alarm. The whole town would have come down on me. I'd be dead before I hit the ground. Claire hadn't been warning Emma against me. She'd been trying to save me. What's the other way, Billy? I asked, my voice tight. The boy swallowed hard. There's a cellar from the stables. It connects to the house's foundation. It comes up through a trapdoor in the pantry, right next to his study. He doesn't know about it. It's been boarded up for years, but it's not safe. The tunnel is old. It could collapse. It's a risk we have to take, Emma said, her eyes blazing. She looked at me. She saved your life, Sam. Yeah, I said, a wave of guilt and gratitude washing over me. She did. But as we looked at the key in Emma's hand, a new terrible thought dawned on me. The first note said, the brand is a lie. If the ledger on the desk was a fake, then maybe the brand on Emma's arm was too. Maybe it wasn't Rusk's mark at all. So why put it there? It was a plant, a piece of misdirection. Rusk wanted me to see it. He wanted me to recognize it and assume he was the sole enemy. He was leading me by the nose, pointing me toward a false trail while the real danger, Sheriff Coates, lay in wait. But why? What was Coates's role in all this? And if that brand was a lie, what other lies had we been swallowing whole? The deeper we went, the more it felt like we weren't just fighting a man. We were fighting the entire town. The cellar smelled of damp earth and forgotten years. Billy led us to a corner of the stable, hidden behind a stack of old saddles, and pulled away a section of loose floorboards. A black square gaped at us from the dirt floor. It's tight, he warned, and there might be snakes. We've dealt with worse snakes upstairs, I said, grabbing a lantern. I went first, dropping into the narrow hand-dug tunnel. Emma followed close behind. The air was cold and dead. The beam from the lantern cut a weak circle in the oppressive darkness. The tunnel was little more than a crawl space, the damp earth pressing in on all sides. Billy was right. It felt like the whole world was weighing down on us, ready to crush us at any moment. After what felt like an hour of slow, agonizing progress, we reached a stone foundation. A small, rotted trapdoor was set into it, just as Billy had said. I pressed my ear against it, listening. Silence. I carefully, slowly, pushed it open. We were in a small pantry, smelling of dried herbs and dust. The door to the main house was slightly ajar. We could hear the faint, rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock. Emma clutched the brass key. His study is at the top of the stairs. Second door on the left, she whispered. He sleeps until 9. We have maybe an hour. We crept from the pantry into the house. It was a place of ghosts. Every shadow seemed to hold a memory of the girls who had passed through. Every creak of the floorboards a whisper of their fear. We climbed the main staircase, avoiding the steps Emma remembered as being the loudest. The house was opulent, filled with dark wood and velvet curtains, a rich shell covering a rotten core. Outside the study we stopped. A faint line of light was visible from under the door. Was he in there? Had we been wrong about his schedule? I held up a hand, signaling for Emma to wait, and pressed my ear to the heavy oak door. I could hear a faint scratching sound, the scratching of a pen on paper. Someone was awake. Someone was in there. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was wrong. It was all wrong. Had Billy lied to us? Was he one of them? My mind raced. We couldn't go in, but we couldn't leave without the ledger. We were trapped. Then Emma did something I never would have expected. She didn't panic. She didn't run. Her eyes narrowed and a look of cold calculation came over her. She pointed to the door opposite the study. "The library," she mouthed. Then she pointed to the window at the end of the hall. She was forming a plan right here in the lion's den. She slipped across the hall and silently opened the library door. She gestured for me to follow. Inside, rows of unread books lined the walls. A large window looked out over the back garden. Emma slid it open. The morning air was cool on our faces. Her plan was clear. Create a diversion, then grab the ledger while the occupant of the study was distracted. It was risky, insanely risky. She looked at me and mouthed one word. "Trust?" I nodded. She took a deep breath, then picked up a heavy, leather-bound book from a nearby table. She crept back to the hallway, peered around the corner toward the study, and then hurled the book with all her might. It sailed through the air and smashed through the window at the far end of the hall. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the silent house like a gunshot. A moment later, we heard a chair scrape back in the study. The door flew open, and a man stood silhouetted in the doorway. It wasn't Rusk. It was Sheriff Coates. He held a pistol in his hand, his face a mask of surprise and anger. "What in the hell?" he growled and started down the hall toward the broken window. This was our chance. It was now or never. I burst from the library, sprinting for the open study door. Emma was right behind me. We had seconds, maybe less. The room was just as she'd described it. Oak desk, fireplace, shelves of books. I saw the corner of the rug that looked slightly rumpled. I tore it back. A small iron safe was set into the floorboards. "The key!" I hissed. Emma pressed it into my hand. My fingers were clumsy, shaking with adrenaline. The lock clicked open. I threw back the heavy lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a single black leather ledger. The real one. I grabbed it. "Sam!" Emma screamed from the doorway. I looked up. Sheriff Coates was standing there, his surprise replaced by a look of murderous rage. He'd realized it was a diversion. His pistol was leveled, not at me, but at Emma. "Drop it, Red Hawk," he snarled, "or the girl dies." We were caught. There was no way out. He had us. I looked from the ledger in my hand to the gun pointed at Emma's heart. He was going to kill us both anyway. We knew too much. But then from behind Coates, a new figure appeared. A small shadow moving fast. It was Billy, the stable boy. In his hand, he held a rusty, three-pronged hay fork. He didn't hesitate. He didn't make a sound. He lunged forward and drove the pitchfork deep into the sheriff's back. Coates screamed, a horrible, gurgling sound. His fingers spasmed on the trigger. The gun went off, the shot deafening in the enclosed space. But he wasn't aiming at Emma anymore. The bullet tore into the doorframe, inches from her head. He collapsed to the floor in a heap, the hay fork sticking out of his back like some grotesque mockery of a saint's arrow. We stared, frozen in shock. Billy stood over the body, breathing heavily, his eyes wide with what he'd just done. He had saved us. Claire was right. We were supposed to trust the boy. But our relief lasted only a second. From downstairs we heard a shout. "Sheriff, what was that shot?" And then, the heavy thud of boots on the stairs. Lots of them. Rusk was in the house, and he wasn't alone. We had the ledger, but we were trapped on the second floor of a house full of killers, with our only way out blocked. The trap Claire had warned us about hadn't been for me. It had been for anyone who came looking for the truth. "The window!" I yelled, grabbing Emma's arm and pulling her into the study. Billy followed, his face pale with shock, still clutching the bloody hayfork. I slammed the heavy oak door shut and shoved the desk against it. It wouldn't hold him for long. We ran to the window. It overlooked a narrow side roof, steep and slick with morning dew. Below that, it was a 12-foot drop to the hard-packed dirt of the alley. It was a suicidal jump, but it was the only way. Heavy fists began to pound on the study door. Wood splintered. "Go!" I shouted at Emma and Billy. "Go now!" Billy, still dazed, scrambled out onto the roof. He slipped, his boots finding no purchase, and slid down the slick tiles, tumbling over the edge with a cry. I heard him hit the ground with a sickening thud. I didn't know if he was alive or dead. Emma hesitated, looking back at me, her eyes wide with fear. "Sam! There's no time! Go!" I shoved the ledger into her hands. "Protect this! No matter what! Go!" She scrambled onto the roof just as the study door burst open. Rusk stood there, his face contorted in a mask of pure fury. Behind him were 3 of his men, all armed. Rusk didn't have a gun. He had a long, wicked-looking skinning knife, the same kind of knife I carried. "Red Hawk," he spat, his eyes burning with a hatred that was years in the making. "I knew you'd come back. I've been waiting." I backed away toward the window, pulling my own knife. There was no escape for me, but I could buy her time. I could see Emma on the roof, hesitating, looking back. "Run, Emma!" I screamed. "Run!" Rusk smiled, a cold, dead thing. "She won't get far. No one ever does." He and his men advanced into the room, spreading out, cornering me. This was it. This was the end I'd been running from for 6 years. I wasn't going to die in a jail cell or at the end of a rope. I was going to die right here, in this house of horrors, fighting the monster who had stolen my life. I met Rusk's charge. Steel rang on steel. The fight was a blur of motion and pain. I was 1 man against 4. I was fast, but they were relentless. One of them got behind me, swinging a heavy chair that caught me in the ribs. I heard a crack, and a blinding, white-hot pain shot through my side. I staggered, gasping for air. Rusk saw his opening. He lunged, his knife flashing. I parried, but I was too slow. The blade sliced deep into my forearm, the ledger. My blood splattered across its black leather cover. No, Emma had the ledger. I'd shoved it at her. I looked down. The ledger was on the floor by my feet. In the chaos, had she dropped it? Or had I never given it to her? My mind was reeling from the pain. She was gone. She jumped. She had to have gotten away. Through the window I saw her. She hadn't jumped. She was clinging to the gutter, the ledger tucked under one arm, her face a mask of terror. She had seen me get cut, had seen the book fall, and she was coming back for me. "No!" I croaked. It was the opening Rusk needed. As my attention wavered, he drove his boot into my wounded side. I collapsed, the air driven from my lungs. The world swam in a haze of red. He stood over me, his shadow falling across my face. He picked up the ledger from the floor. "You see, Red Hawk," he sneered, wiping my blood off the cover with his sleeve. "This is what happens to heroes. There are no heroes out here, just meat." He raised his knife for the final blow. I closed my eyes, bracing for the end. But it didn't come. Instead, I heard a new sound. A crash of glass from the hallway. Shouts of confusion. Rusk paused, his head tilting. What now? A woman's voice, sharp and commanding, echoed up the stairs. "Ambrose Rusk, this is United States Marshal Ella Griggs. You are surrounded. Come out with your hands empty." A marshal out here? How? It was impossible. Rusk looked stunned. For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. He looked down at me, then at the ledger in his hand. He knew it was over, but he wasn't going to be taken alive, and he wasn't going to let me live. "If I'm going to hell," he snarled, "you're riding shotgun." He raised the knife again, but before his arm could descend, a shot rang out, not from the hallway, from the window. Rusk's head snapped back. A small, dark hole appeared in his forehead. His eyes went wide with surprise, and then they were empty. He crumpled to the floor, dead before he hit the boards. I twisted my head, looking toward the window. Emma was standing on the roof, both hands gripping the sheriff's pistol she must have snatched from the floor. Smoke curled from the barrel. Her face was pale, her hands were shaking, But her aim had been true. She had saved my life. Again. Then I saw the blood, a dark stain, spreading across the front of her dress, high on her shoulder. When Coates's gun had gone off in the struggle, the bullet that hit the doorframe, it hadn't missed entirely. It had torn through her first. She looked at me, a faint, tired smile on her face, before her eyes rolled back in her head, and she collapsed, sliding down the steep roof and out of sight. The world went black. I woke up to the smell of disinfectant and the scratch of a wool blanket. My arm was bandaged, my ribs tightly wrapped. I was in a clean bed, in a room I didn't recognize. Sunlight streamed through a nearby window. For a moment, I thought I was dead. Easy there, Red Hawk. I turned my head. A woman sat in a chair by the bed. She had a weathered face, sharp gray eyes, and a U.S. Marshal's badge pinned to her vest. This was Ella Griggs. Where? I started, my voice a raw croak. Emma. The girl's alive, the marshal said, her voice matter of fact. Tough as a $2 steak. The bullet went clean through her shoulder. Doc says she'll have a nasty scar, but she'll live. She paused, her gaze intense. She's the one who sent for me. I stared at her, confused. How? That stable boy, Billy, when he saw you two go into the house, he didn't just wait. He ran. Rode like the devil himself was on his tail to the next town over, where he knew the telegraph line was. He sent a wire to the territorial capital. It was a message the girl, Emma, had him memorized before you even left your cabin. A message from her sister, Claire. My mind struggled to keep up. Seems your Claire was a clever girl, Griggs continued. Before she died, she sent a package to the marshal's office. A sworn affidavit detailing everything she suspected about Rusk, Coates, and the trafficking ring. She named names, dates. She even suspected who the clients were. But it was all circumstantial, not enough to act on. Her last instruction was that the evidence was to be held, and if we ever received a coded telegram from a boy named Billy, we were to come to Drywood with every gun we had. Emma knew. She activated her dead sister's final plan. Claire, even from the grave, she was still fighting. She'd laid all the groundwork. She knew she might not survive, so she'd set up a contingency, a final, desperate play to bring them all down. She'd put her faith in a stable boy and a sister she hadn't seen in years. Rusk's men are in custody, Griggs said. We found the girls locked in the cellar, 5 of them. They're safe now. And this ledger, she patted the black book sitting on the table beside her. This thing is going to burn this whole county to the ground. It's not just names of girls, it's names of clients. Judges, ranchers, businessmen from as far away as San Francisco. Rusk and Coates weren't the heads of the snake. They were just the local fangs. It was bigger than I ever could have imagined. A web of filth that stretched across the territory. But there's something else, Griggs said, her voice lowering. Something you need to see. She opened the ledger to the very last page. It wasn't a list of names or payments. It was a family tree. The Harrow family tree. It traced their lineage back for generations. And at the bottom there were 3 names. Claire Harrow, Emma Harrow, and their father, Thomas Harrow. Next to his name was a note, written in Rusk's precise, cruel hand. Founding partner. Provided the initial investment and the first 2 subjects. I stared at the words, but my brain refused to understand them. The first 2 subjects, Claire and Emma, their own father. He hadn't just been a grieving parent who'd let Rusk take Emma in. He had been part of it from the very beginning. He'd sold his own daughters. Claire running away to the west wasn't an act of rebellion. It was an escape. He had sent Rusk after her to bring her back into the fold. And when she refused, when she started digging, he had his own daughter killed. The cruelty of it was staggering. It was a betrayal so profound, it almost didn't seem real. The man who should have protected them had been their first monster. He was the source of all of it. Where is he? I asked, my voice cold and empty. Thomas Harrow? Griggs's mouth tightened into a thin line. He's a respected man back east. Rich, powerful, untouchable. Not anymore, I said. 3 weeks later, Emma was well enough to walk. The bullet had taken a toll, but the fire in her eyes burned brighter than ever. We didn't talk about her father. Not yet. The wound was too raw, too deep. Instead, we focused on the future. The Harrow house was seized by the federal government. With the help of Marshal Griggs, Emma petitioned the court. She wanted to turn it into a real home, a sanctuary for the girls they'd rescued, and for others like them. She wanted to take back her family name and wash it clean with light. Billy the stable boy became the groundskeeper, his loyalty unwavering. The town of Drywood, rotten to its core, began the slow, painful process of cutting out its own cancer as the arrest continued, reaching higher and higher. The day before I was set to leave, to ride back to my quiet cabin in the desert, Emma found me by the stables. She was holding an old faded photograph. It was a picture of her and Claire as young girls, standing with their father. He had his hands on their shoulders, a proud smile on his face. "I used to think this was a picture of a happy family," she said, her voice quiet. She tore the photograph in half, separating the girls from the man. She handed me the half with her and Claire. "Keep this, to remember that monsters sometimes wear the faces of people we're supposed to love." She looked at the other half, the image of her father, for a long moment. Then she let it fall to the dust. "He's just a man," she said, "and Marshal Griggs leaves for Philadelphia in the morning. She says she has a warrant she's very much looking forward to serving." Justice. It wasn't always a gunfight or a courtroom showdown. Sometimes it was a quiet truth that traveled 1,000 miles to knock on a monster's door. I looked at the picture of the two sisters, smiling in the sun, a lifetime before the darkness found them. "You finished what she started, Emma," I said. "No," she replied, turning to look at the new sign being hung over the boarding house, which now read, "The Sisters' Sanctuary." "We did. I rode out the next morning as the sun was rising, casting long shadows across the desert. I wasn't riding back to a tomb anymore. I was riding back to a home. The past was still there, full of ghosts and pain, but it wasn't a chain around my neck any longer. It was just a story of how two brave sisters, one living and one dead, and a broken man who'd forgotten how to fight, took on a world of monsters, and against all odds, they won." The desert wind was whispering again, and for the first time in a very long time, it sounded like hope. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you for listening. It's stories like these, of light in dark places, that remind us what we're capable of. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more tales of justice from the shadows. Every story deserves to be heard.